The Stranger by Albert Camus. You've probably read hundreds of stories that start with someone dying, usually followed by a wave of sadness and regret. But The Stranger opens with something very different. That's how Camus begins his story. A man who can't seem to feel what everyone expects him to, and that lack of emotion becomes the center of everything. You see, most stories about death begin with grief, but The Stranger opens with something colder and harder to explain. The story begins with the death of Mersault's mother, and he simply doesn't cry or feel anything. Mersault is our main character in this story, and the novel starts with this opening line where Mersault is saying, "Mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I can't be sure." And right from that first line, you know something's off. He doesn't cry or even seem particularly sad. He just takes a bus to the nursing home where she lived, mostly annoyed about the long ride and the heat. When he gets there, he meets the caretaker and they set up the vigil beside his mother's coffin. There are other people there in the funeral, old residents from the home, sitting silently, some crying, some dozing off. But Mersault is more focused on how bright the light bulbs are, how the coffee tastes bitter, how the room smells of varnish. He stays awake all night because he's bored and restless. And then comes the funeral. The next morning, they start walking to the cemetery under the brutal Algerian sun. He doesn't think about his mother's life. He just thinks about the sweat running down his face, the blinding light, how long it'll take to get back. When one of the old men beside him starts crying, Mersault feels nothing. He feels no sympathy. Instead, just a vague irritation that it's so hot and noisy. He doesn't tell you what Mersault feels. He just shows you a man standing in front of death, noticing everything except the thing that matters. After the funeral, he goes home, takes a nap, and the next day, he goes swimming. At the beach, he runs into a woman he used to work with. Her name is Marie. They go out, watch a movie, spend the night together. The next morning, she asks if he loved his mother. He says, "I guess, but that doesn't mean much." Then she asks if he loves her, and he says, "No, not really." He says that without any hesitation or awkwardness. You get the sense that Mersault isn't cruel. He's just disconnected from the world everyone else seems to live in. He doesn't play emotional games or pretend to feel something because it's expected. And somehow that truth makes everyone around him deeply uncomfortable. As if Camus is telling you that there's no deeper meaning behind life. Things just happen. And that's all. That's actually the heartbeat of this novel. The absurdness, which Camus calls absurdism. He feels no grief. Everything feels normal to him. He goes to work, types reports, eats lunch at his regular cafe, comes home, and stares out at the street from his balcony. Life moves like a series of small, disconnected scenes, and he's just there in all of them. He spends a lot of time with Marie now. They swim together, go to the movies, sleep together. She keeps asking if he loves her, and he keeps saying he doesn't, but that he still enjoys being with her. He doesn't think love matters. He doesn't think anything does. There's this almost hypnotic rhythm in how he talks, like he's cataloging life instead of living it. That's his inner world. Simple, literal, and present. Then we meet his neighbors, and this is where things start to twist. There's Salamano, an old man who lives with a scabby, sick little dog. He curses at the dog, beats it, yells at it all day, and yet, when the dog runs away one evening, Salamano breaks down. He cries like he's lost the only thing that gave his life meaning. It's a small, quiet moment, but it says everything about human contradiction. How people abuse what they love and how they cling to habits even when they're miserable. And then there's Raymond. He's young, shady, and violent. He calls himself a warehouse clerk, but everyone knows he's involved in some kind of pimping. He tells Mersault about an Arab woman he was seeing and how he thinks she's cheating on him. Raymond wants revenge. He writes her a nasty letter to lure her back, asking Mersault to help him word it right. And Mersault does. Raymond beats the woman later, gets reported, and asks Mersault to testify that she cheated on him. Again, Mersault agrees. To him, it's not a moral issue. It's just another thing that happens. Marie sees all this and starts realizing something strange about him. She likes him, but she also senses that emptiness inside him. Still, she asks him to marry her. The days pass, the story moves slowly. Raymond invites Mersault and Marie to a friend's beach house for the weekend to relax, swim, but this trip will change everything. So Mersault, Marie, and Raymond go to this beach house near Algiers. It's a quiet place owned by Raymond's friend, Mersault. It's the kind of day that feels too hot even to exist. The sand burns and the sea glows like a mirror. That's how it's described in the book. For a while, it's normal. They swim and drink wine. Marie's laughing. The men are talking about nothing in particular. But that peace doesn't last long, because near the beach, there's a group of Arab men watching them. One of them is the brother of Raymond's girlfriend, the same woman he beat. They've been following Raymond for a while, waiting for a chance, and you can feel the tension in the air. Not just between the men, but between everything. The sea, the light, the heat, it's all pressing down like a physical weight. Eventually, they fight. Raymond gets stabbed in the arm. The Arabs disappear into the rocks, and the group retreats to the house. Raymond gets furious, pacing and bleeding, waving his gun around. Mersault is calm as ever. He takes the gun from him and tells him to cool off. They eat lunch, get rest, and try to forget it, but Mersault can't. Maybe it's the heat, or maybe it's the silence, or maybe it's the strange, shimmering pull of that light on the water. Whatever it is, he takes Raymond's gun and walks back down to the beach alone. The next few paragraphs in the book, they're famous for a reason. They're not written like an action scene, but more like a fever. He walks toward the sea. The air feels like fire. He sees one of the Arabs lying near the rocks, half asleep, his knife catching the sunlight. And here's where Camus does something genius. He doesn't describe fear or anger. He says, the sun was the same as it had been the day I buried Maman, and like then, my forehead especially was hurting, all the veins in it throbbing under the skin. That same sunlight from his mother's funeral, that same blinding indifference of the world. The Arab raises his knife. The blade flashes and Mersault fires. He shot once, then, after a pause, he shot 4 more times. After that, the story shifts completely. Everything slows down. The man who never felt much will now face a society that demands feeling, a world that demands guilt, meaning and remorse, the things Mersault never had. After the shooting, Mersault is taken in by the police. He doesn't resist or argue. He just answers their questions plainly like he always does. They ask if he regrets it. He says no. They ask why he fired 5 times. He says the sun was too bright. The detective looks at him like he's not human. He tells Mersault that everyone feels regret, that it's normal, but Mersault just shrugs. He says what's true for him, that he doesn't feel anything, and lying won't change what happened. The more honest he is, the guiltier he looks. In prison, the days blur together. At first, he's annoyed by the noise and the heat. He misses cigarettes, Marie, the sea, but slowly he adjusts. He starts sleeping longer, counting the lines in the wall, imagining every detail of his room outside until his imagination becomes enough to live on. Camus shows us something quietly terrifying here. Mersault doesn't fight for freedom because he doesn't value it the way we do. He doesn't cling to the past, doesn't hope for the future. He just exists, and for him, that's enough. That's what makes him so alien and yet so familiar. Then comes the trial. The prosecutor doesn't talk about the Arab who died. He talks about how Mersault didn't cry at his mother's funeral. He talks about how he went swimming the next day, how he watched a comedy with his girlfriend that same week, how he slept with her. And suddenly, the case isn't about a bullet, it's about emotion, or rather, the lack of it. They say he has no soul. They say he's heartless, immoral, a danger to society. The lawyer tries to defend him, but even that defense turns weird. That he doesn't know what he's doing, but Mersault hates that. He doesn't want to be excused. He wants to be seen as honest. When Marie testifies, she's nervous, tearful. She tells them Mersault was calm the day after his mother's funeral, that they went swimming, that he didn't seem sad. The crowd gasped like she's confessed a sin on his behalf. And Mersault just sits there listening, watching everyone judge him not for the murder, but for his refusal to pretend he's something he isn't. Everyone's talking about morality, faith, the soul, but no one's talking about what actually happened. They sentence him to death. So now, Mersault's in his cell waiting to die. He doesn't know when it'll happen. The guards tell him nothing. Days stretch. The silence is almost unbearable, broken only by footsteps in the hall or the clang of a gate far away. He thinks about how much time he's slept in his life, how the world keeps moving outside. Sometimes he imagines escaping, but even that fantasy feels pointless. And then one day, the prison chaplain comes to visit. He asks if Mersault wants to pray, to ask God for forgiveness. He talks about heaven, but Mersault just shakes his head. He says he doesn't believe in God. He says none of it matters. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. The story of Frankenstein starts in a quiet lake house in Switzerland, with a bunch of writers trapped indoors by endless rain. So it's 1816, and a volcano had erupted the year before, filling the skies with ash. The whole world went cold. The crops have failed, Days looked like twilight, and people said it felt like the end of the world. Inside this gloomy mansion by Lake Geneva, some of the most famous writers of that era were stuck together. Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and an 18-year-old woman named Mary. They were bored and looking for something to pass the time. Byron suggested they each write a ghost story. Mary didn't have an idea right away. But that night, she had a nightmare. The nightmare was so vivid that she woke up shaking. She saw a pale student kneeling beside something he'd built from stolen body parts. And when he turned it on, it began to move. That's how Frankenstein was born. She was just a teenager. But she wrote a story that's haunted the world for over 2 centuries. A story about ambition, creation, guilt, and loneliness. And strangely, the real monster isn't who you'd expect. So, the book opens with letters written by a man named Robert Walton. He's an explorer who's sailing toward the North Pole. He writes to his sister, describing how he's chasing glory, trying to go where no one's ever gone before. He sounds confident in the letters, but you can feel that loneliness creeping in. His ship gets stuck in the ice, surrounded by nothing but frozen white, and he starts to realize that maybe he's gone too far. Then one day, his crew spots something moving across the ice. It's a man riding a sled pulled by dogs. The figure looks massive, like almost unreal. A day later, they find another sled. It's broken and half buried, and a man lying beside it, nearly frozen to death. They bring him aboard. He looked thin and weak and shaking from fever. That man is Victor Frankenstein. When Walton mentions a strange figure they saw out in the snow, Victor's eyes widen. He says, "You've seen him then?" And that's when he begins to tell his story. Victor starts from the beginning. From his childhood in Geneva, his family was wealthy and kind, and his father was gentle and wise. They adopted a little girl named Elizabeth, who became like a sister to him. Over time, that bond grew deeper. She wasn't just family, she was something more, the person he loved without even realizing it. Victor had 2 best friends growing up. One is Elizabeth, and another boy named Henry Clerval. Henry was everything Victor wasn't. He's outgoing, romantic, and alive to the world. Victor was more withdrawn and quieter. From a young age, he was obsessed with learning about the mysteries of life. He got into alchemy, old mystical texts about turning metal into gold or finding immortality. His father told him it was nonsense, but Victor didn't listen. He became obsessed with understanding how life begins, what force makes something alive. That curiosity grew darker as he got older. When he left for university in Ingolstadt, he promised to write home often. But the moment he arrived, something changed in him. He met professors who taught modern science like chemistry, biology, anatomy, all that. And one of them said something that stuck with him. If you want to understand life, you have to start with death. That's the thought that consumed him. Victor spent months studying the human body. He started dissecting animals at first, then eventually started dissecting people. He began to notice tiny things like how muscles looked under different conditions. He started collecting bones from graves. He saw them as just raw materials. He became convinced that he was close to discovering the secret of life. And one night, he decided to do it. He built a man. Every piece chosen carefully. Every muscle, every tendon stitched together. The body was huge and nearly 8 feet tall. Victor didn't want it to make it so giant like a monster. It's just that smaller details would have been too hard to work with, so he made it bigger. He worked for months without rest, ignoring letters from home. His mind was completely gone to the obsession. He didn't think about what it would mean to succeed. He only thought about whether he could. Then one night, it happens. He finishes. The final wire connects and the creature stirs. Its eyes opened. And Victor, who spent years dreaming about this moment, looks down and feels nothing but horror. He thought he was creating something beautiful. But now, in the half-dark light of his lab, the face looks hideous. The skin doesn't sit right. The features are wrong. There's something deeply, viscerally disturbing about it. The kind of wrong that your brain recognizes instantly but can't explain. He immediately leaves the lab, hides in his bedroom, and eventually collapses from exhaustion. When he wakes up, the creature is gone. Victor falls into a kind of breakdown. His friend Henry Clerval arrives at the university, full of energy and excitement, and finds Victor half mad with fever. Henry nurses him back to health. And slowly, Victor starts to feel human again. He never tells Henry what he's done. He just says he was overworked. Months go by and Victor tries to forget the whole thing. He walks around the city, reads letters from Elizabeth, goes back to his studies. For a while, everything feels normal. Then a letter comes from his father. His younger brother, William, has been murdered. Victor rushes home. He hasn't seen his family in years. When he reaches Geneva, it's storming thunder. On the way home, he passes through the woods. Suddenly, there's a flash of lightning, and in that split second, he sees something. A massive shape, distorted, crouched in the distance. He knows instantly who it is. It's his creation. That moment is one of the most chilling in the entire book. He knows it's the creature. When he reaches home, he learns that the family's servant, Justine, has been accused of the murder. They found a locket belonging to William in her pocket. She insists she's innocent, and even Victor knows the truth. He knows who really killed William, but he can't tell anyone. Who would believe him if he said, "Actually, the real killer is an 8-foot-tall corpse I brought to life in my apartment." So he stays silent, and poor Justine is hanged for a crime she didn't commit. Victor's guilt becomes unbearable. He retreats into the mountains, trying to find peace in the vast emptiness of nature. And that's where the story takes its next turn, because high up in the frozen Alps, alone in the wilderness, he meets his creation again. No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. Alright, so this is a story of a man who, despite being born human, never figured out how to be one. His name's Yozo Oba, and from the outside, he's everything you'd expect from a decent guy, but inside, he's a complete void. A guy who can fake a smile, but doesn't actually understand what people feel. From the very beginning, Yozo realizes he's different. As a kid, Yozo grows up in a wealthy household. His father's a strict political figure, always surrounded by servants and officials. And Yozo, the youngest son, grows up terrified of being found out. Yozo's entire life becomes one long act. He figures out early that if he keeps making people laugh, they stop asking what's actually going on inside. Everyone thinks, "Oh, Yozo's such a happy, funny kid." Nobody suspects the fear and confusion underneath. Nobody notices that he doesn't actually understand empathy or connection, he just mimics it. When Yozo gets older, he goes to school, and his class clown routine continues. Everyone likes him, but no one knows him. He doesn't even let himself know him. But then, one person finally does notice. That's when Yozo starts drawing secretly. He draws crude, emotional sketches because it's the only way he can say what he actually feels. But of course, this tiny spark of self-awareness doesn't fix anything. He still can't stop pretending. By the time Yozo moves to Tokyo for college, he's fully embraced being two people, the smiling clown and the hollow human underneath. He ends up falling in with a group of so-called bohemians, the radical, broke artists, and leftist intellectuals. They drink too much, talk about revolution, and hate the rich. Yozo fits right in because he's still pretending. He's funny, careless, and acts like he doesn't care about money or status, but he also doesn't care about life. This is where he discovers alcohol and women. It's like he's filling the void with whatever numbs it fastest. He starts sleeping with the women he barely knows, drifting from one meaningless night to another. He calls it love, but it's really just escape, another way to feel something without actually connecting. Then one night, he meets a waitress named Tsuneko. She's gentle, soft-spoken, and depressed, the kind of person who sees pain and recognizes it. Yozo thinks, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the one person who can fill the hole inside him. But the problem is, both of them are drowning, and instead of saving each other, they drag each other deeper. One day, Yozo suggests something horrifying, that they should die together. He doesn't even say it dramatically. It's almost casual, like he's offering a solution to a minor inconvenience. And Tsuneko agrees. They go to a seaside inn, drink, and then throw themselves into the ocean. But only she dies. Yozo somehow survives. He wakes up in a hospital. The newspapers write about the suicide. His family is disgraced. He's labeled a criminal and a coward. After that, he cuts off contact with his family. He bounces around, staying with acquaintances, drinking constantly. His only skill at this point is playing the part of the charming tragic drunk. He meets a woman named Shizuko, a bar hostess with a daughter. She's older, kind, and sees Yozo as a wounded stray. They move in together, and for a while, he plays husband and father, but it doesn't last. He can't hold a job. He drinks more. He spends money he doesn't have. At one point, he even becomes a cartoonist for a magazine, and ironically, people love his silly drawings. They think they're hilarious. He's literally getting paid to keep pretending to be the funny guy. But the more success he gets, the worse he feels. Eventually, his addiction gets out of control. He starts taking stronger substances. He starts cheating on Shizuko, sleeping with other women from bars or acquaintances. He even steals money to feed his addiction. And then, one night, he's betrayed by a friend who reports his morphine use. The police arrest him and his already ruined reputation sinks to rock bottom. His family, desperate to erase the shame, declares him mentally ill and sends him to a sanatorium. In the sanatorium, Yozo spends months as a shell. He doesn't talk much, he just exists. After his release, he's sent to live under the care of a family servant, a kind old man who looks after him out of loyalty. They move to a quiet countryside house. He spends his days smoking, drinking, and staring at the floor. And this is where he writes his final note, the last of the 3 notebooks that make up No Longer Human. He says he has no hatred toward anyone, no hope, no desire, just a hollow acceptance that he was never meant to be human in the first place. He ends it with this quiet, haunting line that people probably look at him and think, he's no longer human. And that's where the story ends. Just a man who spent his whole life pretending to be part of a world he could never truly belong to. And when the mask finally fell off, there was nothing underneath. Osamu Dazai wrote this book not long before taking his life. And while people love to read it as some philosophical tragedy about alienation, when you strip it down, it's really just a story of a man who couldn't find a reason to exist in a world that never felt real to him.